This is it. This is the podcast. We're in it right now.
Are we? Are you also recording?
I am recording.
Look at us
so
go.
That means this is it. This is...
Us doing a podcast, yeah.
We're in the moment.
A whole
exciting.
98 of them, I think.
I get out of the habit now. Now we're doing them once every couple of weeks. I forget how to talk in this kind of venue. It's good.
This episode...
It only takes 2 weeks for that to atrophy.
Yeah, well, because normally, obviously, because I have to put on this persona, because I'm most of the time just yelling at my team.
Yeah.
So it's I have to kind of put on the Mike Bithell.
Yeah,
mask
horribly
in order to
abusive.
do this.
You have to try to...
Horribly, yeah,
kind,
famously
yeah.
so.
Yes, famously so.
And you have the facial hair, which is not that it's a prosthetic purely for purposes of the podcast.
If you guys can see...
This- yeah, this- none of
I
this
put
is
some
real.
art up, by the way. And I noticed that from the camera, I put this that's Austin, and that's Mike. You can't see Troy or I because of the perspective.
It's actually there actually isn't Troy or you in it. It's just an image of me
actually
and Mike
sawed it
you
in
have at
half.
home.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then I put this one from Ollie up here as well because I'm trying to.
That's cool.
I actually decided that I'm going to buy a canvas to cover the electrical box and do something on it myself.
I
then
like
I
the
was
amount
like-
of God of War art you have as well. That you've kind of basically like created like the stereotypical game development cubicle in your own home.
It
to
is
work
my
from home.
office,
It's
so
great.
like I would
Yeah,
have
it's good.
told you guys I work from a desk that's right there, and I also have a TV there for the dev kit that I've moved.
Sure.
And then this part is obviously content creation perspective. So I do work from here as well. The God of War stuff is like, I didn't buy any of it.
So there's a PS6 just over there.
There's a PlayStation
Exactly.
6 right there.
That's incredible.
yeah.
What amazing.
Yes. Looks, it's huge. Huge.
Oh, they always are. Yeah. You know, it makes sense. And they have to fit in all the the hologram components, all that stuff. It
Yeah.
takes up a lot of space.
Yeah, it also, strange choice, they decided to make the entire PS6 vibrate like the DualSense,
Yeah.
just to add to atmosphere in case you happen to be touching it.
It's called the Floor Sense. Yeah, it's like a
Nice.
it's like a bass speaker. It's good.
Very good.
It's and it's powered by NFTs, of course.
Thanks, Sony.
This whole thing should be one of those animated bits to like see
it.
the artist
Episode
rendering
2.
of the vibrating PlayStation.
The problem was, Austin, you didn't talk in it, so
Yeah,
it would be
it's
another
another
one of
one
those
with you
that
not in
locked
it.
in. It's
Yeah, I
your
was gonna
objective
say,
will never be in
yeah.
them.
I ran into Shuhei
me.
Yoshida at GDC.
Oh, I love Shuhei.
Yeah, very, very big fan. And he asked me how God of War was going, and I said, "That's NDA'd, Shu." And that was my favorite experience of the
passed the
whole
test.
thing.
You passed the test.
Was telling Shuhei Yoshida that I couldn't tell him anything about God of War.
Oh.
There must be some kind of like chairman emeritus kind of, like you are lifetime included. That even if his role changes, I feel like
We were in public,
he must
though.
have.
Like
What?
there were people. We were in public though. There were people around.
Well,
so
obvi- no,
despite
yeah,
his
of course.
role, I wasn't going to answer the question.
But I just mean I don't mean in out of respect for his time in the position that he had there, but like contractually, it would be like there is nothing we're allowed to keep from you internally at Sony forevermore as part of your
You've earned the
employment
Yeah,
trust.
contract.
it's very
Yeah,
like
yeah.
tied to him at this point. He's very synonymous with the brand. And I was saying this to somebody on my team, had my first press experiences because obviously DICE is not any press, really. Very little.
God. Yeah.
GDC is. And
Yo.
it was very interesting. And I also like got the perspective shift of how, so I would sometimes ask a dev or somebody a question that I knew was jokey that I knew they wouldn't answer. And I think I got some of those. And getting those the other way around was not as fun as I thought. It's actually just awkward. And I was like, oh.
Because you've got the boss who's told you before you went in, under no circumstances can you kind of reveal any of this. And then
Nobody
you've got
said
some
any of that
smart
to me.
ass
I
films.
just assumed.
Oh,
I
right.
could have told everybody everything, technically. No, I have NDA.
People
signed also.
probably rightly or wrongly assume that you have a good grasp of like media training just through
I
osmosis.
think so, but I also, obviously, because I was in media for so long, have a lot of media friends.
yeah.
So they were asking me, like, somebody just asked me a question that...
Your friends just casually come up to you like this. So I'm just curious, how's everything going?
But there was...
I love the idea that they've still got like the
Got the fedora with the little press badge on it as well.
lamp on
And they have, like, a little hat.
with the camera.
Yeah.
the little flashbulb. Yeah.
They're prepared to hand the scoop to a little kid and like with suspenders
I
who's
think
going to
that
run
some
off.
people may have asked me because they thought I would answer. Maybe I don't know. But I got one question that was like, "How different is the axe this time around?" And I was like, "What? I can't answer that question." And they were like, "Oh, I just thought that." No, what the fuck? No, I can't answer any question you would ever have for me about this. And like that one, because it was somebody I knew well, I was like, "What are you doing?" Whereas the other ones, it's just like, haha. It turns out not as fun as I thought when I did it to devs all the time. More just awkward and uncomfortable. I apologize.
That's okay.
I had a version of that at GDC.
On behalf of all other game developers, I accept it.
Thank you. It means a lot.
My sort of variation on that was I've had a lot of calls one-on-one over the pandemic, as we all have, where obviously you're alone in a room talking to someone alone in a room on a at least hypothetically secure, non-broadcast connection. And so,
like this one.
Yes,
yeah,
nobody's
exactly.
recording this. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, the exchange of privileged information in conversation feels like you don't think of taking special steps beyond just the normal way. Like if you need to have a conversation with somebody that's confidential, including even for personal reasons, like just, can I confide something in you kind of thing. I think we've gotten so used to this rhythm. I had a moment where I was I had a meal during GDC with a friend, and I asked them a question not quite as egregious as your axe question, but a little bit kind of like, so I'm curious, XYZ or whatever about the thing that you're working on that, officially isn't announced kind of thing. But we were at a restaurant, and it's funny how even just me asking, I felt the person suddenly so aware of all the and then it made me aware, and I was like, oh yeah, you're right. And they kind of looked around and was like, yeah, maybe we should talk on the phone.
You can hear a lot of NDA conversations around GDC. Like, I had a friend who works in PR who overheard an entire game that has not been announced at a bar at GDC. That she was like, as somebody who works in PR, I thought about telling them to shut up, but I was like, I'm just going to leave that. It's a really bad idea. But again, I think a lot of people don't have media training. They don't. No, that's not even media training. That's just being smart.
Well, and we're just out of practice of
sense, isn't it?
Well, we're out of practice of just the very idea of what being in earshot even means, because we've had 2 years of that not being a fact of life.
I also think one thing that's cool with games is often like the ridiculous thing happens. So I had it at DICE where I'm going to be very careful. There's a guy who I always will go up to and I'll do a joke because he works at a company and they make games, obviously. And, I'll ask, when are you making the next sequel to franchise X that I like? And it's a funny, funny joke. And
sounds
this
hilarious.
time, it is a really funny joke. You're going to just have to trust me on that. And this time...
It's right up there with Half-Life 3 confirmed.
Yeah, please assume all jokes I make are very funny.
From this point on.
Yeah.
If I stop talking and smile, please laugh.
Okay.
Please laugh.
Yep.
Okay.
The Jeb Bush of finishers.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just thinking that is Jeb Bush. Imagine being famous for that one thing.
I know.
But no, I'm keep hitting my mic. But yeah. So anyway, went up to him this year and did that joke, and he looked awkward because clearly he is now working on that thing, and it was therefore kind of I basically stepped into the exact same trap you did, but kind of in a way that's been building for about 8 years, which is quite fun.
That actually is good, though. I like that. I think.
But that means
I feel
you
like
got a
you manifested it.
I basically did. I manifested. I hate that. Can we all stop?
Oh my god, I hate it too.
Manifest?
I hate it too.
It's
it drives
nonsense.
me nuts.
It's pseudoscientific bullshit.
I saw this video
that people
yesterday.
are just accepting.
Someone was like, "Have you manifested today?" And I was like, wanting
the
things.
sun wouldn't have risen if I hadn't.
Like,
so yes, you're welcome.
Wanting
the
things
thing about
and then working towards getting them. If you call that manifesting, cool. But if you just kind of sit there and have a think about it and you don't action any of it,
no. It's all that the secret stuff, isn't it? It's that kind of idea that people who don't have things they need are just not trying hard enough to want them. And it's like, that seems like a very middle class and up kind of perspective on the world. I don't really trust it.
It's true.
Yeah.
Well, what that always, at least from my sort of half analysis of it, is that what those things like the secret inevitably leave out is when you focus your goal and start acting towards it, then statistically you're going to start seeing results. And by acting as though it's the thought only, as opposed to the fact that you've now motivated entirely different set of behaviors that will cause reactions. You know, like if I start telling everyone my favorite thing on the planet is video games, and I just go about my life as normal, statistically, I will encounter some person after a certain amount of time that goes, oh, that's so... I have a friend, actually, I went to university with who works in video games, and I could connect you if you want. And it's like, I've manifested this, hypothetically speaking. I'm a success story of that model. But in reality, it's also ignoring the 99% of conversations that didn't. But that 1%... wouldn't have happened if I hadn't kind of actually made it a conscious goal. So it's one of those where I always
being motivated and sharing your goals with people is fine. It's this idea that there's like a magical weight to the universe that kind of will pull things towards you.
Exactly.
We could get pretty deep on that one. There's a lot to unpack.
Can we?
What is this podcast for? Let's do it.
If not God.
This isn't about video games. This isn't. You're gonna put a title on it, which is, I don't know, GDC or something.
Yeah, GDC. I don't know GDC. I'm gonna do that now.
That'll be the name of the YouTube, and then it will just be a 1 hour.
This is the first episode somebody else has named. I'm writing that down. It's going to be, I don't know, GDC
American
or something.
spirituality. It's going to be great. I
don't know.
Because it was an American,
GDC
wasn't it? Like the Victorian era, who kind of, that idea of like manifesting is like a very specifically American spiritual.
Well,
it was like
it's
like because it's tied to like
I wouldn't have guessed it goes that far back.
Thinking.
As somebody who's not at all spiritual, you can also tie the idea of manifesting to you thinking about something positively, and thus you feeling more positively about it, and thus you being more likely to take action. Again, I'm with you, Austin, that I think it's just statistically, if you think this thing and you speak about this thing and you do this thing, the thing is going to happen.
You'll also recognize opportunities. Because, you know, it's like everybody who's ever shopped for something. I always use the example of buying a car, but it can be literally anything. It can be I'm in the market for new sticky notes. And as soon as you have that at the forefront of your thought, suddenly you'll realize that thing you're looking for is everywhere all around you, and you notice it in a way that you tuned out as ambient noise. Like if you're shopping for a car, the specific model that you're interested in will suddenly be every other car you see on the road. And it's one of those things. It's just we filter so much, and as soon as there's a sort of a
as somebody who's trying or thinking about getting a BMW i8, let me tell you, I never see them because I would love to, because I want to ask how people park, because they have.
Well, that's a fancy car.
You're not manifesting it hard enough. You're not leaning into the act.
I need to look at myself in a mirror and go manifest, bitch, and then see what
19th
happens.
century, by the way. I looked it up.
It is American?
The law of attraction. I think it's where it definitely comes out of Christianity. It was someone called Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, which
sure you nailed
I don't know. I'm sure I got absolutely perfect.
Sounds
and
like
Thomas Troward. I feel more confident with that one.
BMW i8 has these doors that do this. Instead of going like out, they do this. They just go up on the sides, and it's terrible design.
DeLorean.
I was
sort of
say,
like a DeLorean.
You just want to time travel.
I really like the car, and my issue is that I'm like, how do you park anywhere and get out? And so I just want to find somebody with that car to be like, excuse me, sir, tell me, how do you get out of this car if you're parking? I just need the
There must be Reddit.
I have looked it up on YouTube, and they're all so forgiving because they're all fanboys. So they're like, yeah, sometimes you just, it can be a little tough. What does that mean?
Sometimes you can't get out of your car.
But it's a great car. What does that mean? I don't know.
I guess it just means don't park in a compact spot. And
yeah,
you should
maybe.
be all right. Or you can be one of those bros that gets a car like that and just blatantly straddles two spaces with a I don't give a fuck kind of.
Let everybody know I'm
cool. Those guys are cool.
hung.
Yeah, we like
cool.
those people.
Yeah, they're really cool.
They're really they're always, especially if you can also do it on a handicap spot. Really, Really, you gotta. That's manifesting. That's like
talking about two spaces and one of them is handicapped.
I'm gonna manifest some new people in my life. I'm gonna get a lot of unsolicited introductions to strangers
nice
doing this behavior.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay, so manifesting by definition is not actually what we are speaking about it as in this context. It is display or show a quality or feeling by one's acts or appearance demonstrate. So you can manifest
like qualities towards you.
You can manifest a sign of severe depression. but that would mean you are depressed. So that's the first.
It's almost a
definition.
synonym of like exhibiting. It doesn't
Correct.
necessarily,
Exhibiting, demonstrating. Otherwise, it's be evidence of or prove, which
But we're not in the sense. Are you doing like the
these are
dictionary
literal
definition?
definitions. I think what I'm saying is where
Yeah,
the
I'm
way
talking-
we're talking
yeah.
about it has evolved beyond these. And then the third one
Yeah.
is become apparent through the appearance of symptoms. So like a disorder that usually manifests in middle age.
This is manifestation in the magical sense of
Yes.
bringing something into being.
Yes.
This is the idea of like, what's it called? The new something like it's an American. I swear it's new American, but it's this idea of like laws of attraction. If you put out something into the world, you can get something back.
Right.
That is
It's
the
used
secret.
largely by that's the secret. It's used largely by cult leaders, basically, to get them people to send them money. Essentially,
Or at the very least, people who have a lot of privilege. Like, I just don't feel like you can really make that stance unless you don't have a lot of shit to worry about.
or it can be a very attractive stance if you're someone who's in a really bad situation, right? Which makes you very easy to manipulate
Yeah.
by.
You guys
gross
seen all
people.
the Hillsong stuff that's been going down?
What's that?
I believe it's Hillsong.
Hillsong?
The church. That's what it's called, right?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of like American churches who do the whole like send us $100.
Actually, in Australia,
God will give unto you $1,000. You know, never does. Interestingly, I don't know what the
Hillsong
money goes.
was, I believe, actually started in Australia, or New Zealand. I think Australia. I hope I'm thinking about the right thing. Basically, just their like leader had to step down because he had engaged in inappropriate behavior with 2 women, and then another one got outed, and it just kept happening. And they did this private live stream that David Farrier, I guess he would go as journalist. You know who he is? Made Dark on Netflix.
Oh yeah,
Again, I think I know him probably because
He made Dark. That's like the German show.
no, it's a documentary series. David Farrier. Again, I think I may
So
also
to say,
know of
I
him.
don't see how someone could remotely be overlapping.
Dark,
as a
sorry, it's Dark
journalist and-
Tourist. I
What?
just said Doc. It's a documentary series. on
yeah,
Netflix.
yeah.
Dark Tourist, the movie I scored that we talked about once, was not supposed to be called that.
Documentary
No,
series.
the thing people scrolled past to find that on IMDb when you said it.
So again, maybe I only know him because of the proximity, whatever. He's pretty well known, but he found a link to this meeting and wrote up a full transcript of it where all of these people were so sad about this man who assaulted women stepping down. And they're just their speeches, because they didn't realize it was going to be public, are also like, it's such a tough time for him and we feel so sad. And it's like, Jesus Christ. And they got charged by the cops, et cetera, et cetera. So that whole thing blew up. And yeah, I guess he got a link to an unlisted video on YouTube with the note, please do not share this link. Naturally, he got the link. There were like 400 people watching, I think. And it was the church's founder who was charged by the police for covering up his father's child sex abuse and for engaging in inappropriate behavior with 2 women. Wild. So then, yeah, he just watched this and wrote a full article about the breakdown of how the church's internal leadership reacted to the whole scandal, and it was truly terrible. I'll leave a link to the article because it's very interesting.
Sounds fascinating.
Getting
Yeah.
a private.
Seems to be no
private
shortage
link.
of stories like that. I definitely, that's one of those. The modern era has facilitated catching those kinds of frauds in a way. Like my favorite ever was the Amazing Randy. The skeptic who went to.
What's the name of the documentary? We should put people onto that documentary.
I
about
can't
him.
remember.
I'm gonna look. I'll look it up. You carry on
look.
going.
But he had a very famous thing where he went to a big megachurch faith healer who was taking people's money and claiming to heal them in real time, and part of his shtick was not knowing what their ailment was and being able to predict it and making the crowd gasp. And Randy went in there with what is the equivalent of a police scanner and was able to hear the guy's wife pre-interviewing people and feeding him radio tips like right before they talk to somebody on a little hidden earpiece.
Damn.
And went on like Johnny Carson went public with it on a talk show. He didn't that was his way of going to the press and publishing his findings. They literally played this video for the first time ever on, I think it was on Johnny Carson.
Wow.
He was always, he went, and basically if you were someone making a claim of like some kind of paranormal ability in public, he'd go on like, he'd go on like a Johnny Carson and do your trick on stage basically and ruin it.
He also had $1 million prize.
That's the name of the documentary.
Write that down.
He did, didn't he, for someone who could prove a mystical act, was it?
He was something, it was like if you could demonstrate the supernatural in a way that's, reproducible by scientists. Well, I mean, it would have changed. Yeah, it would have changed the world.
Changed the course of history. That would have been amazing, though. Can you imagine? That's the thing. I think with all of these people, I remember him saying as well in interviews that like he spent his whole life. I think he died, right?
He did recently.
Recently, An Honest Liar is the documentary. I think he says in that documentary that like, no one wants to be proven the paranormal more than him. Like, he'd love...
Oh, yeah, exactly.
...the real thing, to someone to show up with actual magical abilities.
Like, here's
that
a
would
ghost.
Be incredible.
It's an interesting
here's
thing
a ghost.
to dedicate
Here's
your life
telekinesis.
To. Do you think what he's doing is good? Is his decision to do that morally good?
Oh, my God.
I think magical thinking hurts more people than many, many diseases do. I think the idea of, like... faith or belief in nonsense can like cure
it's just
cancer
that
or save you from a horrible situation.
I totally
like,
for sure,
kill so many people.
For sure, but like as an atheist, I have Mormon family members, and I have known people who are part of the Mormon Church who were drug addicts, terrible people, stealing, like abusing each other, and then found the church and became effectively moral people. Even if it's something that I don't think is related to the religion, again, as an atheist, it still is an institution that gave them the motivation to put their lives on track.
There's a difference.
And I think I'd love to see that without the religious aspect. It'd be amazing if
I think sometimes it's not enough motivation.
I think that's a separate thing, but I think if you could create the sense of community and caring, it's also a very, and I hate to be mentioning America, but like it's really interesting when you walk around America how much of like the infrastructure for like the safety net of society is actually created by churches in America, which is a very American. That like outside of America, like the government will step, local government will kind of step in and help people a bit more. Not to bash Americans, but it seems to be that weight is carried more by the religious groups in America than it is elsewhere.
That's why, as a tangent to insert with that's why in the more conservative states that typically vote for less social safety net programs, statistically, like when a Hurricane Katrina type thing happens and they look to see where donations are coming from to support, those states tend to give, especially via their churches, their church fundraisers and things. There's a strong correlation of them being also
that's interesting.
Like I don't know if they outperform, say, California or something. It gets probably difficult to calculate, but I know that there's a lot of folks that do believe strongly in those safety nets, but via those communities.
And then you see the church doing all those great things,
it's God.
And it's very easy to see. Or you see the value and you care for religion a lot more. It actually kind of explains a lot of evangelicalism to me. Actually, that's an interesting kind of aspect.
Well, there is the nefarious side of it, though, which is like the Church of Scientology is exceptionally guilty of is that safety net that is being offered is actually an evangelical platform, and it's about going to people in their most vulnerable hour and essentially saying, we'll help you out and sure would be great to see you in the pews on Sunday in exchange kind of thing. And there's a lot of scooping up. Now, again, I don't want to cast too broad a stroke, although I don't mind saying that broadly of the Church of Scientology. I mean, they full on bought a suicide hotline.
No, Scientology's real.
They bought a suicide hotline?
It was something like that a few years ago. They basically...
Well, their whole thing is they don't believe in psychiatry, right? So they're really interacting with people at very...
They don't believe in psychiatry?
Yeah, they think psychiatry is like an evil con, yeah. There's a whole... I don't even want to get the angry mob in my direction. I have no problems with Scientology and would never want to cast aspersions on Scientology and the people who practice it.
I am the opposite.
I'm fine with
It's
it too.
it's their stated belief that psychiatry is evil and manipulative. Don't they have like a fake museum in like California about the evil history of psychiatry? And of course, like any medicine, psychiatry definitely has had dark moments in its progression, obviously, which they like to linger on and talk about. But the other aspect of what you just said, Alanah, that I wanted to come back to was, I don't think it's what you're saying, but this idea of like yes, there's community in the church, yes, there's these things, but this idea of like morality being something that's specifically tied to mystical thinking is something that I've always kind of had a real issue with as well.
Agreed.
Like, because humans knew right and wrong before they, in my opinion, made up religion. Like there's an old Penn and Teller gag. Or no, sorry, no, it's not Penn and Teller. It's just Penn Jillette, isn't it? There's an old gag from him, which is religious people ask me what's to stop me from killing anyone. Why can't I kill as many people as I want to? And to which his answer is, I can kill as many people as I want to. I want to kill no people, though. Yeah. Obviously. Like, because...
he has killed as many as he wants.
I've killed as many as I want. He's a better writer than I am. He's killed as many people as he wants to.
I definitely think there are a lot of, like, immoral things, or a lot of immoral religious people and a lot of immoral stances that different churches take. My question is more, if people believing in something is the path to them becoming quote-unquote better people, subjective, is it inherently bad even if the thing that is making them a quote-unquote better person is not true? And to also add to the Mormon thing, so again, I know people who converted to Mormonism and it like saved their lives. Flip side, when my granddad was dying, had dementia in church, he was Mormon his whole life, gave virtually all of his money to the church, was a bad dad to my dad because he was just so obsessed with the church. As he was dying, they came to him and complained that he hadn't given any payments to the church and told him he would be going to hell. He dedicated his whole life to Mormonism. And then when he's on his deathbed, they're like, fuck you, you're going to hell, because he wasn't giving them any money. It was infuriating to witness, like his whole life. And they were like, no, done, don't care. Didn't visit him, didn't help him, like nothing, just demanded money. It was terrible. That's horrible. Question. It was fucking infuriating.
I don't have an answer to your question you asked. I can't answer the question you asked. Like the whole, like, is it, if the ends are good enough, does it justify lying to people? That's a tricky
lying
one. Like, that feels
is
like
different. I'm not saying lying. The lying is bad. I'm trying to remove it from the people who are known liars at these centers.
Well, sorry, in my opinion, organized religion
they don't know that they're lying.
A lie. Oh, if they don't know they're lying, if they're true believers.
Yeah, the people who come knock at your door and are like, have you heard about the good word of God, don't think that they're lying to you. They think they're helping.
No, that's true. Yeah, they have a belief, and that's different to lie. You're absolutely right. I don't know. I think philosphiers have argued over this for millennia, haven't they? Like,
I don't know either.
Does the ends justify the means?
I
don't know.
This is something I think about a lot, and I think, given that we're a social species, and we are deeply wired to think in terms of belonging in a group, I think something that we have found is that people will organize themselves into groups one way or the other. So you can, like, it maybe my church is identifying as a musician, or maybe it's identifying as a gamer or as a professional member of the game industry. And obviously, it's the overlap of all those and many others.
You find your tribe to an extent, right?
But we all will. So the ability to become morally improved, and I would also, as a side note, my tangent within this is when you said, Mike, people knew the difference between right and wrong before religion codified it. I agree with that to a point, but I think that moral clarity is a thing that we are constantly attaining as a species, and there are things that we consider wrong today collectively and as individuals, and there are things that we consider wrong today that 100 years ago no one had quite realized were wrong.
We used to stone people in the streets.
Yeah,
and people would go.
Some still do.
And the
public
fact
hangings.
that exactly, like Jim Crow. There are lots of people alive today who lived on both sides of that, and many other comparable things. And, I think that, so I would say in the
you're
most
right. That's a good
zoomed
point.
out
That's a really
way
good point.
of like right and wrong, I think there is an intuition about like fairness that I mean, they've witnessed this in chimpanzees, where they'll give, they'll teach chimps a trick and they'll give like a banana to one in exchange for the trick and not to another. And it sees it get a different prize and loses its shit because it's not fair. But if they're treated equally, they'll behave more calmly. Like, so intuitions over right and wrong stemming from an idea of equal treatment and that sort of thing is not even exclusive domain of humans. So I just wanted to add that in there, that right and wrong
No, it's a really
to me
good point.
is like, to me, the,
Well, I think
obviously
you learn it your whole life. Like I used to, if somebody
sure.
would knock at the door and do have you heard the good word of the Lord? As a very obnoxious teenager who was one of those, I was one of those, religion's like a dick. Yeah, I don't.
One of those proud
Don't
God delusion
shove it
waivers,
down your
right?
throat or
Like,
whatever.
yeah.
Just like very angry about
okay.
religion existing. No, it was. But then, like, I came to a point where I was like, the people knocking at my door, who I previously would have been like, "Fuck off! How dare you!" I was like, that they do think they are helping me. They are
think they're doing a
spending
kind
their
service to
time
you.
coming to
Yeah.
try to help me. Why am I getting this mad at them, even if I don't believe what they're saying will help me? So point there being, I think even on our own lives, we have scales of what we think is good and what we think is bad. And it's a learning experience the whole time. I was a jerk.
And I think it's really worth being. I went through the same arc. I had a very, like there's the notion of being an atheist versus an anti-theist.
Sure.
And I would have absolutely identified as a, like you said, waving my Dawkins and my Hitchens.
Yeah.
And
I think
don't
that's a
feel that way
stage,
anymore.
isn't it? I feel like every baby atheist goes through the smug kind of "I'm going to tell everyone I'm right" kind of phase of the,
I hope so. That's
of the
comforting.
process.
I like to think.
I think
we
everyone
all do.
does. I think it's in the same way as most religious folks will go through like you hear a lot from like I've got my friends who are religious went through like a very zealot phase in their teens where they were like absolutely like obsessively passionate about religion, and now it's faded into a part of their life. You know what I mean? Like it's the up and down makes sense.
That to me is the key to the compassion of, like when you watch debates about religion, normally what the problem that the atheists always fall into is they will represent the religion in a way that few of the believers actually adhere to. Like when we talk about
right?
when we talk about the stoning of non-believers, and we talk about, I mean, this is obviously something that Muslims, 1 billion plus Muslims, deal with more than probably anybody, but Christians do as well, where taken to the letter, these religious texts are full of absolutely horrible things, of which most of the believers don't consider it to be like this thing you have to follow.
Yeah, because the
down
Quran
to
is
the
also
letter.
full of a lot of good shit.
They're both full of
Both.
they're both aggregates of accrued thoughts of people over hundreds of years, and they're going to reflect
bad.
the full range. Exactly. There's even within the New Testament, in the Jesus meek and mild, there's plenty of things that make him look like a radical and a warlord, and in it alongside the the compassion, love thy neighbor, give to the poor. And it's like, and so what I find is modern Christians increasingly filter out the parts that to them feel clearly morally vacuous, and this seems to be all religious trends. And the ones that take these really hardline kind of ultra literalist stances invariably become fringe and minority within the religion. And that's one of those things where to your question, I say religious gatherings that add meaning and especially add social structure to people, particularly when they struggle. Like if there's a community and someone loses their house, they get laid off, and the members of the church rally to help them get up on their feet and all that. It's like, I would support that kind of thing, and I would help. I would attend those services. I would do anything to help those kinds of people. When it becomes a question of, is all of that predicated on a thing that is known to be
make them
not
money.
true?
Oh.
Well, that's to your original question that
Yeah.
kicked us off on this, of like the thing. I definitely agree. I wouldn't call it a lie, but I personally would rather. I think that there is harm that can be lurking in building your belief on a thing that is not true, even if it's rarely actualized. Like most of these people say, I will pray that my cancer is cured, but I am also going to go to a doctor. Like most will make that calculus. And so it's like the belief of it not being true. I mean, the belief in a thing that is likely not true, or at least to be most honest,
it can be super harmful if you have cancer
no
and you decide not to go to the doctor.
Yeah, for sure. And those people are actually pretty rare. So that's the thing that has led me to really be a lot more compassionate. Plus, what I've found is, the humans, we do have a tendency of a religious instinct, and if I had the choice between a charlatan politician or cult leader whipping up people and leveraging that tendency versus people just continuing their family tradition of going to church or whatever, I'm like, we've seen what happens when people kind of reject those more long-standing organizations and get swept up into the
benefit of the long-standing ones is the original cult leader died, so they've moved away. There's more. I'm not saying that just to be glib, like that. A religion aging will have exactly the effect you're talking of, usually trending towards moderation, reformation over time. And that will help. Cults are by definition going to be more erratic because they have a head, a person who's in charge. It comes back to as well the thing of the two arguments of like, should you spoilers for anyone who's listening to this in the car with children. First of all, don't listen to this in the car with children, but also maybe pause or skip for 10 minutes. The thing of whether parents should do the Santa myth at home, right? Like, should you tell your kids that Santa exists? Should you play along with it? Should you do all of that? Right. It's definitely something that atheists discuss. And there's two schools of thought. One is, no, you shouldn't, because you shouldn't teach a child to believe things without evidence or any kind of foundation in reality. You shouldn't teach them how to have that magical thinking. And there's also a school of thought which is you should absolutely do it so they can find out that old people aren't to be trusted and that stories can be made up. And there's both of those. That's actually a lesson that's theoretically.
Third school of thought that says
it's just a bit of fun.
That it's a bit of letting their
atheists don't have
fun.
Atheists don't have fun. Sorry, it can't be allowed. It's all going to be very serious and smug, I'm afraid. But I like the idea of like teaching a kid like there are going to be things that you learn from me as a parent which are not going to necessarily be true. They're going to be things that I believe, maybe, or things that are going to be untrue or societal or whatever. Like, training a kid to kind of question the reality that's put in front of them, everything that happened before they were born, that's a good lesson, I think. That creates an inquisitive mind, hopefully.
I got kicked out of religious studies in high school because I asked questions. I wasn't even really rude about it. I went to a Catholic primary school. My mum did not have my sister and I baptized because obviously my dad's side of the family is Mormon. There's a lot of pressure for that. But she was like, no, we'll let them make their own decision. So I went to a Catholic primary school where I was treated poorly because I was not baptized. Teachers told me I was dirty.
With your journalist notepads asking questions, right?
Pretty much. And so I, came to high school where, again, I had been bullied by Catholic teachers because I was not baptized. Came to high school, did religious studies where they actually told us about other religions. Very interesting to me now that we never once learned about Islam. Everything else. We learned about Hinduism, everything else. You did no mention of Islam whatsoever. But in any case, I just asked questions and I actually probably was an asshole, but I don't recall being an asshole about it because I know that I could have been. And I was like, I'm not, I'm just going to ask questions. I got removed from the class. I was no longer allowed to take religious studies as a class. It wasn't like get out of one lesson. It was, we are pulling you from this entire piece of curriculum for asking questions. And so I never learned anything about religion ever again because I asked too many questions in classes.
Well, that's also, it's an interesting thing in the UK. I don't know if this is true in America, but in the UK or in Australia, when I went to school, it was called religious education. And before I went to school, it was called religious instruction, which is a really interesting breakdown of how religion has evolved as part of the British kind of education system. Is you start with instruction, then it moved to education, where we could mention other religions, but we definitely had there was a correct answer basically, and then to studies where it's like, now it's actually more, I think, more egalitarian. But that's an interesting thing growing up in a country with a state religion. and the differences that does to your education, because
assume-
Henry VIII, Anne Boleyn was really hot. It had to be done.
I always remember
Should we have
hearing
state religion? I don't know, because I was at a public school for high school.
Well, as a colony, well, you would have been in the Commonwealth, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So you would have been. Does that mean the Queen is the head of your religion?
Yeah, she's head of state.
Probably.
Yeah.
But would she be the head of religion as well? Probably,
don't know.
right?
I remember once seeing an interview with Richard
Anne Boleyn was
Dawkins.
really hot. Like, it had to be done. Can you imagine how hot she must? Anyway, it's fine.
It happens.
And there was an interview I saw with Richard Dawkins where he said, they said, why do you think America with freedom of religion is so much more religious than the UK, which is so atheistic and has a state religion? And his answer was, well, because it's a state religion, everyone grows up in and around it. It's kind of like it's like when it's like a teenager discovering drinking. If it's presented as a forbidden fruit, they're more interested. But it's so ambiently and generically.
You can't
present.
claim it's the underdog, can you?
Yeah,
you
he's
can't
like,
say like they're cancelling Christmas and all this.
But-
Yeah, exactly.
But it's
It's
interesting
just
because
so
one thing
boringly
that
around.
Americans, some Americans, think, I guess, versus being from a Commonwealth country, is that they think that they have God-given rights and that certain government scriptures were written in part by God. Like, they think amendments were written by God, and
I don't know anybody that thinks that the amendments were written by God.
It's your God-given right to have a gun.
That's
It's not
different.
an uncommon phrase.
No, that's different. That stems from the Enlightenment era political philosophy that basically says governments can only limit rights. Their rights pre-exist the government.
Oh, so it's the opposite of what I'm thinking.
They use the language of the time would be these rights are God given, but it just simply means at birth you have the rights to do everything, and then the government takes the list of everything, literally, like, think of pure anarchy, zero rules. Then the government's job is to codify the subset of things within that you cannot do, like you cannot murder, blah, blah, blah. But all things prior
Outside
to
of
the
that
existence
would
of
be
that government.
God-given.
Which, so that God-given
hold
is,
these
I
rights
think,
to be self-evident, right?
it is more of a figure of speech. I would argue,
Okay, there
properly
are people
understood.
who think that there were
I mean, Thomas Jefferson.
government
sorry.
scriptures written in part by God. That literally, yes, some of these things were written with God in the pen. That does exist, but I don't imagine it's very many people. It's like probably not enough.
But there's a really good watercolor of like the founding fathers. You know, those
They fully
papers,
think
like,
the founding
paintings of,
fathers
like,
had God
Jesus
in them.
holding
Like
the pen.
that is a thing that I don't
Yeah.
think
So
anyone in Australia thinks.
What's the artist in America who draws like pictures of like American politicians with like Jesus like putting their hand on the shoulder of
Exactly.
Donald Trump and stuff? I swear I've seen
Exactly.
those images.
That's what
Yeah,
I'm
there's
referring to.
there's no question that there would be some contingent of because there's no, like, a lot of the founders were, not all of them were especially religious, and even the more atheistic ones were really more kind of deistic and not really atheistic. They were just kind of like, God probably exists in some amorphous sense, but it's not Christian conception of God. They weren't really atheist in the
Let's
Dawkins
not worry
model.
about him.
Yeah, exactly. Clockmaker type God beliefs, but
Get on with life and do other things, basically.
but the idea of natural rights is the notion that government's principle,
I
like
see.
positive rights and negative rights, are basically the idea of government's function is to limit behaviors versus the government enables behaviors. And the fundamental concept behind all of American law is the government can only limit behaviors. It cannot enable. You have the right to do everything pending legislation to the contrary.
What
It's
about
almost
the
like it was
12
written in
commandments?
reaction to some other culture, but we don't need to think about the history of that. Or
What about the 12 commandments? Are those not restrictions?
12 commandments?
10,
They have a
sorry.
couple.
It's been too long.
I mean,
I didn't get to the end. I stopped
There are 12
at
of them. 10.
well,
10.
for the record, I think there's like 400 something actual commandments.
They have
in the
amendments
Bible.
too? Commandment amendments?
They have amendments too.
Are we talking about
Amendments.
Are we talking about the Constitution and the amendments, or are we
No,
talking about the Bible?
I'm
and
talking
the
about the
commandments?
Bible and the commandments, because aren't those
the
technically
Bible
laws like that would restrict you from doing
Don't
things
fancy
that would
cows,
impede
that
on your
kind of thing,
God-given right?
Well, only the U.S. Constitution is making the argument that rights are God-given, and the government's role is to limit from
Does
there.
it say that?
The Bible
Is God mentioned in the
verbatim?
Constitution?
Well, that's a good question.
God,
I would have to
guess,
see.
but-
I would have to see the.
It would say one nation under God, right?
I've spent
it
so
does
much
say that,
time
yeah.
reading about I've spent so much time reading the political analysis. I actually have a copy of the Constitution almost in reach. I have my mic.
Go get it. Let's
my
do this.
mic,
Let's do this.
My
Constitutional
mic,
scholar
moment here.
Austin Wintry will return. I think. What do I think? What was I going to say?
I feel like it's every 20 episodes we have a
gift
religious
from my
podcast for
father.
some reason.
It's good though. The comments are going to be so.
The
true
pocket
about how much we
Constitution
don't know.
and Declaration.
Wow.
I'm not going to be able to read the whole thing, but
Please Control F your brain to find the word God.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Do the thing with Matrix, the download
Yeah.
it like Neo does. Yeah.
But point being, the political framework of it, the philosophy of governance that it outlines, is absolutely one of negative rights, in which the powers of the government are those which are specifically enumerated and nothing else implied, which is the whole reason why there's court
You're
system that
sculpting, not
argues over
painting,
these
you're
things.
Cutting away. You're
Yeah,
cutting
like-
away from the marble.
The default state is complete and total rights, but the Bible, I can't speak with any real authority about the Bible, but certainly with anything beyond the
Get your
Bible.
Bible,
There's
especially-
loads
Austin.
of
Let's
rules.
have a look.
Like you can't wear mixed fibers, and there's stuff to do with cutting your hair. It has plenty of rules.
Yeah, I think the political philosophers of the time would have essentially argued that that there would be further things that your religion, beyond what the government is restricting you. Like, for example, the government can't tell you what to eat, but if your religion instructs you to keep kosher, that just means that within the subset of I'm allowed to eat anything I want, my religious personal beliefs will narrow that field in an opt-in, I choose to be part of this religion kind of way. And certainly the U.S. government would have no issue with the idea of people limiting their own behavior through personal and voluntary associations. But it's just outside the purview of the government to restrict that behavior.
And the interesting stuff happens when one contradicts the other, right? When your rights as an American citizen are different than your rights, or your rights can impose upon the rights of another with their religious beliefs and your religious beliefs, and that's where
all the more reason why
fun, interesting stuff happens. Yeah,
and all the more reason why keeping religion and government, separated, it was all the more
unless
important.
Anne Boleyn's really hot, and then it's
the thing that I always loved that
it's all
Hitchens
coming together. It's beautiful.
Hitchens always loved to point out in his debates is when talking about Thomas Jefferson coining the phrase of a wall of separation between church and state. The original context for him having done that, if I remember correctly, was not about the idea of religion guiding governmental policy nor government encroaching on religion, but it was actually two religious communities essentially sort of fighting for an area and being unable to wield the government to oppress the other, and saying that the government can't be made a tool. Tyranny of the majority was always one of the big concerns. That's why this is a constitutional republic and not a straight democracy, is because it's very easy to whip up public opinion on something and then just overtly tyrannize the minority. And they knew that. They designed the to as many checks and balances on the structures of power specifically to prevent that, among other things. And one of those is religious minorities. You'll end up with a community of people that are way outnumbered by the rest, and they shouldn't be under the boot of those who would wield power on use religious grounds to do so. They have no legal backing as a result, which to me is an incredibly enlightened way to structure your law. Like the idea of opting out of the maximum amount of power out of a defense of the minority. Obviously, the U.S. has gone through our aspirations governmentally and constitutionally are often above and beyond our reality. We don't always live up to those ideals as a country. We often don't. But I do think that the essence of that idea is something quite brilliant
It's held longer than most single kind of governmental structures hold. So it's obviously doing a lot right. Like a couple hundred years.
To me, the hope always stems from the fact that it is theoretically.
Very few like democratic governments have lasted 250 years.
My understanding was actually the U.S. has lasted the longest.
It might be the longest. I'm trying not to say that.
I thought you meant that it was like the longest
statement.
Type of government, but democracy's changed 1,000 times over.
No, but it's like all prior democracies at some point fell and been reborn or
fascism
collapsed into something.
There's a strong and quite alarming political theory that fascism is the inevitable result of democracy.
Interesting.
Which is a fun note for this podcast.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, but that's the thing. Absolutely, like
that is interesting.
In terms of historical precedent, in terms of like what has killed
virtually happened every time.
Democracies.
It makes sense.
That's the whole reason why representational republic tries to put a barrier so that pure populism can't be, used as a kind of evil. To me, it's always very interesting, and the thing that always gives me hope. I'm not really a believer in nationalism, which means that patriotism doesn't really fully make sense as a belief, because it's like. Like the whole manifest destiny and all that kind of stuff. That's never.
My mud is better than your mud is.
Exactly. Even as a kid, that never clocked as anything for me.
You have to do the Pledge of Allegiance every day. And you still came out of it.
Had that stuff.
I didn't realize that. Was it you that tweeted that recently, Alanah?
Yeah, I replied to somebody. I think about it a lot. It's fucking terrifying. No, I replied to someone.
It's weird. I never thought about that.
Every day they have to pledge kids.
But for what it's worth, it's always treated. It's the equivalent of having good manners or something. It never felt.
I imagine it's just a chore for kids. You just like get up and I do the thing. But it's still weird to think about.
I totally agree. If I could snap my fingers and not have those kind of indoctrinating rituals to me, I absolutely think they're weird, especially because as a kid, I very, early on, my dad, who was an atheist, was always very encouraging. If I ever wanted to explore religion, he's like, I'll take you to church, I'll take you to synagogue, I'll do whatever you want to do if you are curious. I am not religious, but I would never get in the way of you exploring it. And so that being the context of my childhood, it did feel weird to have to say under God, even as a little kid.
Yeah.
I thought that was odd, but it wasn't offensive or scary so much as like,
yeah,
that's an odd 20 seconds to my day.
I don't imagine it's offensive or scary to the kids.
The Dawkins take on religion, right? The Dawkins take on like national religion, like it's kind of so ignorable by kids that you kind of but it still sets a default. It's still
And there's no question that it can't not have an effect to say words like that 1,000 times. You know what I mean? Like you can't. But all I was going to say, the only point I was driving towards with the whole nationalism and patriotism thing is that while I don't really buy into that as a belief system, it's never really felt descriptive of me. The one thing that always does leave me baseline optimistic about the U.S. Is that the system has baked into its, those self-correcting mechanisms so that as the population becomes more morally enlightened or becomes more diverse from a more global world with a deeper melting pot of immigrants from around the world and all that the system endures and actually like onboards these different belief system and is designed to flexibly adapt for them. And so even as there's still always so much work to do to be what it aspires to be in its documents, it actually has the ability to achieve that without burning the entire thing to the ground. I know there's a lot of people that would disagree with that argument and think that the system is irreparably broken, and I'm always open to being wrong. And I hope they're wrong, because I think it is a remarkable endurance of this country's had some, as dark as people think it is now, it has had some insanely horrible periods in the past and actually managed to be the better on the other side of those things. And I think, that's pretty encouraging. That system, we're not fucked perpetually. You know what I mean? Yeah. I would like to believe. I don't want to overly. I'm sure the comments will say I'm rose-colored glasses and/or don't know anything.
I don't know enough to dispute you, honestly. So
anyone in the comments who wants to just jump in the comments and like just compliment like Austin's hoodie or something, that'd be lovely. Just some nice stuff, because I can imagine some.
I was gonna say I have to go, but I was gonna say, because we've done, like I said, every like 25 episodes or something, we end up talking about religion somehow for some reason.
Sure.
I'm sure there's plenty of stuff that we don't know. We do not pretend to try to educate people or be experts on anything other than our vocations on this podcast. The point is conversation. We're not trying to tell you anything about religion.
We're three idiots in the pub at the table next to you, and you kind of wish they'd be a bit quieter.
Yes, you are just listening to three people having a conversation. We're not pretending to be knowledgeable or to inform you.
Totally.
None of it.
No, that's what I love. I love that we, all of us, actively Google things during the course of the show at one time or another, because the whole point is not speaking from some pulpit of authority, but actually going, I wonder.
Let's explore this.
Hold on. Let me.
I think it would also be a much less interesting podcast if we were afraid to explore any idea that we weren't 100% educated on. So, apologies. We don't know shit. We just like talking.
I don't think you should apologize for it. I'm
not that sorry, to be clear.
It's probably because you know more than we do. Yeah.
For the record, as people have often noted who see me lurking about in the comments in the days following the release of a new one, I check it every 18 hours or so. I'm like, I'm curious what else is going on there. Nothing pleases me more when someone can like link to an article that says this is what contradicts the claim you made at 43 seconds or whatever, and it's like. They show I actually have a browser of all those articles, and I haven't
read any of them. They're just all there.
Yeah,
you click the link.
In a little box.
It's my equivalent of Steve Buscemi and Happy
block
Madison,
on
where I'm
all
putting
of
on the lipstick and writing.
I block every user that's criticized me.
Not even criticize, just correct it. All right.
No criticizes.
I do have to run. Thank you for joining us, everybody. I'm Alanah. I'm a video game writer. That's Austin Winter.
Get to reading.
Composer. That's Mike Bithell. He's a video game director. Troy is still busy off in the world and will hopefully be joining us soon. We're very close to 100, so I hope he can join us.
Yeah, we got to think of what we're going to do.
I put the bat signal out. I've got a feeling he'll come back.
Figure it out. All right. Bye.